welcome to Note Doctors. My name is Paul.
My name is Jenn.
My name is Ben.
And we are your hosts. We are all university music theory instructors who are passionate about music theory and music theory instruction. In this podcast, we will be talking about all things theory with some of the best music theory teachers in the country. If you want to know more about music theory and the most effective and innovative ways to teach it, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Note Doctors. For today's episode, we are interviewing Charlotte Botha. Jenn, tell us a little bit about Charlotte.
Sure. Charlotte is the director of choral activities at Hamilton College in Clinton, New York, where she conducts the college choir and the Hamilton Voices ensembles. She teaches music theory and social justice musicology. During her choral conducting DMA at the University of North Texas, she served as conductor of the Women's Chorus, assistant conductor of the University Singers, and assistant conductor of the Dallas Symphony Chorus. Charlotte's tenure as conductor of the Drakensberg Boys Choir solidified her passion for making music with and composing for young singers. She has performed and presented workshops around the globe, most notably as a member of the World Youth Choir alumni group Time Ensemble. Her research interests include phonetics, choral text painting, and equitable practices for including the music of and by marginalized members of the music community in choral programs. Charlotte's Master's of Music is from Nelson Mandela University, and her Bachelor's of Music is from the University of Pretoria. We had a great chat with Charlotte. She has taught theory and oral skills. She's a choir director, a wonderful singer, and just kind of a jack of all trades. And it was a really wonderful discussion that we had. So here we go.
If you say, this is a major third, or this is a major third, right? If you add some kind of joke, if you use your instrument in such a way that they are still a musician, even though this is not their instrument, right? So they're expressing they're expressing the music because they know how to be a musician. But to take it away from, now I'm going to sing very beautifully, la la, right? We're taking that away, and we're just kind of shouting at each other and making sounds because we all have that inside of us. And we just need to, I think that emotion is very important.
So today our very special guest is Charlotte Botha. How was that? Was that pretty good?
That's
all right,
pretty
excellent. And so we are so pleased to have you on our podcast for today. And we always like to ask our guests at the beginning just a little bit about their background and a little bit how you got into music, and specifically, what made you decide to pursue conducting? Was it just a thirst for unlimited power that one gets when standing on the podium in front of an ensemble, or was it something less than that?
Yeah, not just dictatorship. It's a pretty long story. I'll try to tell it quite concisely. I have many interests, and it's a big old joke that I landed in music. So here's how it happened. I grew up about 2 hours south of Johannesburg in a kind of rural mining town called Klerksdorp. I took piano lessons from a very young age. At some stage, clarinet entered my life, but it left very quickly, thankfully. I'm not a big fan of the clarinet. We hate each other. There's just no love. And so a lot of piano playing. When I was about 12, I started playing percussion. So this clarinet led me to the youth wind ensemble of the area, and then I was like, thank you, could I please play the other thing? So I started taking percussion lessons. And round about the time that I entered into high school, I'd say, I started taking singing pretty seriously. So up until then, I'd been singing in the school choir and provincial children's choir, provincial youth choir, and then I started taking lessons with one of the professors at a university close by, at the University of Potchefstroom, now Northwest University. So singing. And somewhere along the lines, I joined the National Youth Choir. Now, it's a cool concept. What basically happens is during your summer, our winter break is the longer break. In June and July, people from all around go to the Drakensberg Boys Choir campus when they're not on campus. And so we were people from everywhere singing together. And I just fell in love with this place, with the idea of singing choir for a living, doing this every day. And that's where the seed was planted. I finished high school. I did my undergrad in vocal performance at the University of Pretoria. I chose Pretoria because they had the best choir. Johan van der Schant was the conductor, and I dabbled in journalism and art and a little bit of science, but eventually music pulled me in. You can't escape it, if you're destined to do this. And so it was the choir that pulled me in. About halfway through, I got a vocal injury. This is common among vocalists, right? Where are we the people who get these vocal injuries?
Yep.
And I think I couldn't stop singing, but because I couldn't sing, conducting was the solution. And by the end of my undergrad, I had switched to performance in conducting and percussion, and then with musicology as my second field. And as soon as I graduated, I was just thinking about this again. It was like an explosion. I got a job teaching oral skills at my university. This was my first job. It's a pretty intense gig. And a children's choir straight away. Then I became the assistant conductor of the chamber choir that I'd started singing in there. And then I got a high school mixed choir and my favorite choir, which was the veterinary campus choir. This all happened like within 2 years. It was just like this opportunity. And I'm young and I can't feel that I'm tired yet. So I just say yes. And around about then, 2010, I also started singing in the World Youth Choir, which was just the most fantastic and beautiful project. It's about 80 people from all around the world meeting for a summer and touring together in some area of the world, and singing, the type of music that's too difficult to sing at home. But if you put all the music theory junkies together in one room, they can pull it off. At one stage, I had to just take a step back when I was starting teaching oral training at 7:30 in the morning and finishing my last rehearsal at 10 p.m. at night. I was like, I don't think I can continue doing this, but I just have to do this. So what do I do? I'm going to have to do this all in one place because the driving from one side of the city to the other in Pretoria was just getting to me. So I applied for the job at the Drakensberg Boys Choir, which is, where the seed had been planted the first time, which is a choir school, a boarding school. You have 120 students. That is a finite number. These are the people you have to care for and, teach them. And you spend all of your time teaching oral training and music theory. And I taught voice and percussion also. And yeah, it is heaven. It is the best job in the whole world. If you tell me I can go back tomorrow, I'll just go again. It's a really intense audition process. I think at one stage I was doing 1,500 auditions a year to find the right boys to come to the school. And I had a fantastic time. It's a sort of professional choir. It's very well known around the world. So we toured internationally and locally, and we just went nuts and had a fantastic time. And eventually, the one thing that was missing was because in South Africa there's a big emphasis on a cappella singing, and we don't have so many orchestras. So it means that there are some sections of the repertoire that aren't performed so frequently. And I felt like I was missing out on choral orchestral repertoire in general. I really know a cappella music so well, but if you ask me what is this tune, from which oratorio is it, I probably couldn't answer it. And I thought, well, that's not great if I want to be a serious conductor. So I looked for a place that had a kind of traditional approach, but also lots of opportunities. I considered Europe and eventually landed in Texas, at the University of North Texas. And for a brief time there, I was the assistant chorus conductor of the Dallas Symphony Chorus. That's where I met Jenn. And Ben was just around the corner in the theory department. And at the end of that wonderful journey, I happened to marry a Texan. And then thought, okay, well, then I'll apply for a job in America. I think it's okay. And here I am in central New York, almost touching Canada at the top, As the director,
Freezing.
It's freezing. It's so cold. I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I have no idea how snow works. I keep messing it up completely. I'm like, surely this isn't too bad. Yes, it is. Yeah. And so here we are. Small liberal arts school, really gifted students, and I'm here for let's see how long. Yeah,
Well, that's
and
amazing.
That's how I got right here. We'll see what happens next.
I loved singing with you conducting. I learned so much from you, both about singing and musicianship, but also just the way you ran a rehearsal. You're in charge, but it's also very collegial between you and the singers, and I just loved how you ran rehearsals. I loved working with you in the symphony chorus. So you've taught ear training in South Africa.
Yep.
In fact, so the people who have listened to this podcast, I've actually mentioned you before because I mentioned that I had a friend from South Africa who asked me why theorists are the one who teach oral skills here and not choir directors.
Yeah.
And so can you tell us, are there big differences between how we approach ear training in the US and South Africa? Is it similar? Is it totally different?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, that little surprise job I got teaching oral training when my mentor retired at the University of Pretoria, and how I just did what she was doing, which is what they'd been doing all throughout the olden days of apartheid, like very strict Dutch and German solfege training, very, very strict, almost never attached to actual music. Just really focused on the conceptual idea of these are the intervals and these are the chords. And that's one big strength in American teaching, I'd say, in the oral training curricula that I've seen, is that you start with music very often, or you say, what do you hear? Let's figure out what that is. So my experience of music theory is different in that if you want to play an instrument, take singing, you go through these levels of examinations. Some people in South Africa use the Associated Board of the Royal Schools of Music levels, but the cruel and old school one that I did is the University of South Africa, which is really intense repertoire and an extremely intense theory curriculum. So the thing is, if you do grade 1 piano, you have to do grade 1 theory as well. If you want to do grade 5, in order to get your certificate for the practical examination, you have to complete the theory exam as well. So by the time that you get to university, you can write 4-part harmony. You understand music theory up until about some like secondary dominance, I'd say, is where you end up, and then there's a disconnect between this theory and your actual practice, because there's the assumption that there is a connection somewhere there, but very often you'll have a theory teacher for the one and a practical teacher for the other one. They don't really talk to each other necessarily. So we end up it's mostly the University of South Africa curriculum is popular throughout South Africa, but it's mostly Afrikaans kids, like the very conservative folks of my culture, that end up taking these UNISA very, very stringent examinations, and we are robots. We can analyze anything in a minute. We are like so. But I keep asking myself whether there's joy in that. I think that's more like dopamine. I think we find joy in being successful and analyzing it perfectly. Maybe it's that. So oral training is something that's part of the practical examinations. It's like a little add-on at the end. So you practice your pieces, scales, da-da-da-da-da, and at the end they'll be like, what is this chord? Ding, ding, ding. And you say, oh, that's a major chord. And that's a little part of the examination. And then when you get to university, you're like, oh, heck, I'm actually supposed to be able to sight read. So then we do a lot of solfege. Now, I'm sure that has changed. Since I left university, there are new lecturers coming in doing exciting things. I'm inspired by a lot of them. But the theory and the oral training divide is huge. It's kind of theory is seen as this cerebral thing, almost removed from music making, I'd say. And that's one of the weaknesses in the South African system. But the strength is I know exactly what tendency tone is in every key, and I can mention each one of them by the time I'm 14, like, because I'm scared. If I get it wrong, I'll be in trouble. Yeah, and that is what is very different. The other thing, Jen, is that we have the tonic solfa system as a learning method, right? So many of, especially the black cultures, like the Zulu people and like Tswanas and Sothos and whatever, many of these people in church, in services that are in these languages, everyone's reading tonic solfa. So these dots and dashes that pretty much indicate to you 4-part writing, and you're killing it. I mean, it can be very intricate and really amazing. Yeah.
Right. I would say, I mean, I grew up in a sort of kind of traditional Protestant, we did lots of 4-part singing at church, and I learned kind of next to my mom how to make up an alto line and all of that. And when you have those instincts already in place, it is so much easier to figure a lot of those things out, what they are, what the, that the 7th of a chord always resolves down, all of those kinds of things become sort of intuitive.
Yeah.
One thing that stuck out to me, Charlotte, about the way you described your experience as this kind of theory as the robotic, I really found that interesting. I've challenged myself a ton in the past, I would say 2 to 3 years, to allow the students this like space to fail, and I guess challenge like what the quote unquote theoretical models, or the I guess, I don't know how to say it, but those like theoretical abstractions, and like fail and like therefore like be at the cutting edge all the time. And like that's where the robotic, I guess, and the artistic kind of like come together, or like I'm trying to get them so much to be outside of the robotic side, but then like people are, like you say, they're so comfortable in it because like, okay, I know how to do this thing and I'm good at it now, and that's cool, and I make my A, but then it's like, then you're losing like this whole artistic side of like failure and experimentation and like trying new things, And I just find that really interesting how you even described it as like theory as like more robotic, because that's exactly like, I think the way a lot of people, unfortunately, think about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have been to your classes, Ben, and I know that you have them sing and, like, yes, you sound like you're okay. Like everyone is experimenting the whole time. You teach massive classes. It's very impressive what you do.
He's a whole classroom of robots.
150
whole
of
lecture
them,
hall.
yes.
Couple hundred of them.
They sound really good when you get them all singing, though. That's why I really enjoy doing it,
Yeah.
Man, I miss that. I cannot wait for I've said many times, I think twice today in Jazz Theory, I said, well, if this was last year or if this was fall of 19, I would have made you sing the bass line to rhythm changes while we listen to Anthropology, but we can't do that today. And so it's just, I can't wait to have singing back in class again.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. We're not allowed to sing in the lectural halls here, and I'm very happy that I get to teach a little bit of music theory. Also, I'm doing the music for non-majors, and we have the Hamilton College Spirit Fingers Ensemble. We can clap anything. We just, whenever there's an opportunity, I'm like, I know we're not doing rhythm, but could you please clap these chords for me? we just use our bodies all the time. Because we're not allowed to sing because it's so dangerous. Oh.
Yeah.
What a trick.
Yeah. It's a hard time to be a singer this last year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So kind of speaking of singing, I thought maybe we could talk about some strategies that maybe you have for helping students sing, because that's oftentimes a challenge. We have these students come in, and maybe us as a professor, we're not singers. I'm a pianist or a percussionist, something like that. So the voice might not be the strongest thing for us, but the biggest thing is we get trombonists or a flautist that hasn't sung since 4th grade. And they come and they sing for you, and they have trouble even matching pitch, or they sing too low, sing too high, and getting them to understand how their voice works. And I think as someone who's a trained singer and a choir director, you probably have tips and tricks and things that us as theorists, we don't have that knowledge that maybe would help us to kind of help these students learn how to use their voice better.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I think one thing that comes up is if you're if you're a born vocalist, if your first experience with music was vocal, and you've kind of internalized the process of music making, and your body is your instrument, you think about it a little bit differently. And I think I actually wonder about wind players and whether it's true of them as well. But I am so dependent on the quality of the breath I take before I sing and the moment of the breath. And I almost want to think about it as choreographing the breath over the metric landscape, saying like, how big a breath am I going to take in this moment before it happens? Because once you've taken that breath and once you start phonating, there's no fixing the sound. Like people who phonate and they then say, okay, now spin the sound. Like that spinning needs to happen in your attack already in order for that intonation to get there. And I think we sometimes underestimate how big a role emotion plays in the sound that we're making. I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced a rehearsal where someone has insulted the sopranos and then tries to continue with the rehearsal in pitch.
That sounds like a bad idea.
Heck, I don't think I could even sing in tune as I can, and I'm a cheerleader for all sorts of music, but if someone says, if someone accidentally says the wrong thing for me at the wrong time, or says something like, or makes me oversing, say, no, go again, without giving you instructions for why, and you start feeling tiny and whatever, I think then you can't sing in pitch anymore. You just can't sing in tune, and you don't want to. And so I think emotion is huge. If you deliver that, so it's a combination of artistry and emotion, I'd say. If you say, this is a major third, or this is a major third, right? If you add some kind of joke, if you use your instrument in such a way that they are still a musician, even though this is not their instrument, right? So they're expressing they're expressing the music because they know how to be a musician. But to take it away from, now I'm going to sing very beautifully, la la, right? We're taking that away, and we're just kind of shouting at each other and making sounds because we all have that inside of us, and we just need to. Yeah, I think that emotion is very important. So there's the breath, and then. If it's not a wind player, right? If it's a keyboard player, this is sometimes a bit of an issue. I was looking on Wednesday night. One of our section leaders wasn't there, and so one of the very talented first-year students was cueing everyone in their group, saying, "Okay, we'll sing now, sing now, sing now." We don't need to know sing now. We need to know now. We need to know breathe now. So the breath needs to be choreographed into the experience as well. Yep.
I think that's so great. The breath and the emotion, or because that's addressing two things that, you listen to someone sing do re mi, and you're like, what instrument do you play? The tuba. So you can use that much breath to sound good on the tuba. Like if you did that on a tuba, you'd get no sound, right? Yeah. And they're like, so give me the sound that you would need to sound good on a tuba. And that is addressing their voice, right? And then the other piece is that confidence piece. These students are so insecure with their voice. They can sound great on their saxophone or, on a marimba, but, I love that. Just like, sing out, have that emotion, have fun with it, and that's going to change their confidence level immensely.
Yeah. And don't ask them to sing beautifully. Don't ask them to sing in tune. Say, okay, sing that like a witch. Like, take away the musician part of it. Just get the voice going, get the sound flowing.
Oh, I love that idea, because oftentimes they are very concerned about how they sound. Which is a good instinct for a musician to have. But in aural skills, what we're looking for is the ability to demonstrate that you understand right notes, right rhythms, and that you can do it in a steady tempo, right? Yeah. And so if you're over focused on how you sound, you're likely to make errors in the thing that we're actually looking for. So I love that idea of being like, everybody sing it like a dog, Let's sound terrible, but let's do it correctly.
I often say to, like, if let's say one of my voice groups has a difficult run, I'll say, okay, well, now sing it in the voice of your grandmother, and just so that they're, we have meaningful repetition. They're thinking about something else, and you're programming the actual information into a different part of the brain. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. So, you do lots of error detection. That's kind of your job as a choir director. At least some of it is, a big part of it in the early stages of rehearsing a piece would be error detection. And that's something that it's actually an NASM standard. We're supposed to be teaching it in oral skills classes, but it's something I've found that's really hard to do. I always give my students the opportunity to, they have kind of like a wrong melody on their page, and I play the right one. So I've thought many times that we need to also be going the other direction, where they have the right one and I play the wrong one. We're really only going one way, the way that we do it right now and the way our book is designed right now. But I do give them, they tonicize, and I give them the opportunity to kind of sing what's on the page. But immediately, every time I do that, you can see the students who have already really developed their skills, because right away they start circling things that they're like, this is going to be wrong. It sounds terrible, right? They've already got a sense of where all the spots are. And then the students who struggle are kind of correcting those spots internally without even knowing that they're doing it. Because they're looking at it. Yeah, they have the wrong one. And so they're looking at it and they're thinking like, well, it should go to so there. So in their head, they sing so, even if it's fa on the page or whatever, So I have found error detection. Yeah. I found error detection to be something that's particularly hard to teach. And it's something you do every day. So do you have any hints for us? Any tips?
My goodness. Well, I'd say that the challenge for me, it has more to do with listening to multiple parts at a time and error detection in multiple parts at a time. So if I didn't really think about it in one line. Something that I'm finding, I'm just going to keep reinforcing, is we in the kind of Western world we say there's music and then there's dance. And I think that they are the same thing, actually. And we should have our students dancing the rhythms with their feet. And we should have the students keeping a steady pulse with their feet and snapping with the other hand, and just getting those limbs those limbs coordinated, so that I'm talking about rhythm now, but to know when something is happening with the beat and when it's not happening with the beat, because there is only one place for the beat to be. That is where I'm putting my weight right now. As for pitch, I think you're hitting on a very difficult thing there. But I also wonder whether sometimes our error detection exercises are realistic, whether they are the type of errors that people will make. What choral directors are most skilled at in terms of error detection, and this takes a very long time, and you get better and better. And I think there's a reason why we have to start with a choir that sings mostly in 2 parts, then a choir that sings mostly in 3 parts. That evolution is very healthy for the ears. What I've found the hardest thing to hear is in a treble texture, a 4-part treble texture, to hear what on earth the alto ones are doing. So we wonder, why is that, right? And it has a lot to do with the registers of the voice. And you always want the melody to sound really good, so you always place the soprano line in a specific spot. That means that the poor altos are always singing the 4th below and always singing an F sharp, and like, I'm on this break. Oh, I get to sing another note that's also on my break.
We're languishing, like right on our break or a note above.
So this is the part that's hardest to fix, because it's hardest to hear. And then of course the other thing that's hard is when you have equal voice music in the tenor bass voices, because the lower the pitches go, the closer the frequencies are interfering with one another. So that, I'd say, if you wanted to make it more difficult, hide your incorrect notes or your errors in there, hide them in the alto part and hide them there.
That's a great point. Maybe we should be doing like reverse ones where you actually, it would take a lot of work, but make some bad recordings and bury some errors in there, of different instruments or choral ensembles or whatever, and have the students find those errors. That might be a good way to do it. I think the way it's set up in our book is to help them be better at melodic dictation. It's designed to help them like spot their own mistakes and be able to see like, oh, I didn't do that correctly. I didn't raise the leading tone, or I didn't, whatever.
Yeah.
But you're right that to ultimately end up, as a music educator or a choir director or, something like that, they need the other way around. They need the, hearing the poor languishing altos, which you and I are both
Yes. Something I think about is you can never be too prepared. Like, I know I know that it's not a myth because I asked Rick Biella, who is at Texas Tech. He used to say that you don't know the music unless you can close the score and rewrite it. And I don't know if I'm there. I don't know if I could rewrite, but I certainly aspire to be there. And so if that's the first step, I guess audiating all of that, like really sitting with your eyes closed and asking, can I hear all of this music? Can I hear the vertical structures while I'm really just looking at the music? Because the problem with this melodic instrument that we have, which is our way of saying, I understand what that chord is, it's do, mi, so, and I can only give you that information melodically, is that I'm not sure that we're always having an oral image that is harmonic. And I think if I ask the three of you to imagine a diminished chord in root position, you hear it harmonically. I'm sure you can hear it because maybe a lot of you play keyboard or whatever. But I'm wondering whether in every moment we actually do know the vertical sonority, or are we going back and looking at it horizontally again and figuring that out? Yeah. So my method would be to just add more and more vertical sonorities to that. And make it more difficult. Yep.
And then, of course, how do you know that your students are audiating what you want them to audiate?
Right.
I have my students audiate all the time. And as we're audiating through Zoom, which is even more displaced, I'm like, all right, we'll audiate that melody. I will sit here and look at my gray boxes for the next 30 seconds. I hope they're audiating. I don't know what they're doing. But how do you know that they're actually audiating the correct thing?
So what I do to test that is that I give them an instruction. I say, sing through this melody, only vocalize when I show you something with my hand. They're not, then vocalize, they're not. So that they don't know when I'm going to say it. I'm not going to say, we're going to sing measure 5 and we're going to audiate measure 6. They have no idea. It needs to be happening in their ears. And I mean, you obviously start small, right? You start with little scales and then you start with a little bit bigger structures, and then you can eventually get to a piece. I wouldn't say that I'm there with my current choir, but I haven't had them for a very long time, and I think they have shell shock from everything I throw at them every rehearsal.
Well, I do remember one warm-up in particular that you did where you made us like stamp our right foot on every time we hit la and our left foot on every re or something. And then we had to like wave on T, or I don't remember, but I do remember that I couldn't do it and I was really bad at it. And it felt shocking. I normally don't struggle with warm-ups.
If you land yourself in a wonderful solfege environment like Texas, right? You know that these people have been singing solfege forever, and you don't know how many of the exercise they've just memorized. You don't know if people are actively thinking of what chord tone am I singing now, right? So this exercise that it's hated by all, but everyone tries, and I don't think I can do it either, Jenn. But the idea is to try. It's basically, I say, whenever you're singing a chord tone of the tonic, stamp your foot. Whenever you're singing a chord tone of the dominant seventh, snap your finger, or clap whenever it's the subdominant, or I will give, and you build it up and up and up and up, and eventually, hopefully, you can do multiple ones at the same time if you assign them smartly. But it's again to have repetition that activates different parts of the brain, to be thinking about the harmonic structure while you're singing. And actually, to come back to that idea of how do we get our singers to be better singers when they're doing oral skills, what I find is as soon as you add that extra challenge, then the singing deteriorates. So to make them really aware that your singing needs to still be good, no matter how hard you're trying to do these difficult things. Don't forsake the instrument.
I love that, because that is helping those solfege savants that we have in Texas that are like, sight reading is no problem. They got their hand-side ninjas, they've been doing that stuff since 4th grade. and then throwing in that kinesthetic or that physical element. So they have to think, they have to re-engage, because so many of them are just like, okay, I can sight read in my sleep, right? And now you're like, oh my gosh,
that was me in that
am I
choir.
singing in the tonic triad? Like, I love that. It's just re-engaging for those students who might be at a higher level. And maybe you have some students just worrying about the solfege, but if you got that going well, let's add this clap, let's add this snap.
Yeah, totally.
Charlotte, I was going to loop back to one thing you alluded to during that, which was your kind of preparation of kind of audiating, like not only the lines themselves, but some of the verticalities. My question, I guess, is when you look back on this, I think you described it as antiquated but also rigorous theory training that you had. What are the things that you think to yourself, oh my gosh, thank goodness I had that, you know? What are the things that you really find yourself drawing from, you know, in your score preparation, in your leadership of your ensembles, you know, the things that, you know, the three of us and our listeners can kind of focus on, you know, moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, things that I know you do already. I mean, if I hadn't sung so ti re fa from any note from day one, I don't think I would be where I am now. The other thing that's really helpful for me is working with a tuning fork. You know, that has just, I feel like a superhero when I have my tuning fork, because I am the only one privileged to that sound. I'm not taking out a pitch pipe or hitting a key on the piano. I am the only one who knows whether we're singing in tune or not. I am the only one who knows whether that chord is working or not. And I sit with a tuning fork. So from day one, I go, this is La. Okay, it's an A, this is La. Fine. Can I find C? Can I find D from there? Can I semi-do? Whatever. But to then shift that focus to, so here's where you want to land in the end, is can I, while the choir is singing, grab that A briefly without interrupting their singing, knowing exactly which part is out of tune also. So to eventually get there. And you get there by, you know, starting with single pitches, starting with single keys, singing chords with that. But then to also, something I love doing is, for instance, keeping that A in my ear and singing a melody in E flat major. Or plonking out a C sharp the whole time while I'm singing something in C major. To really be conscious of the tonal center. I mean, there's music theory is having a reckoning at the moment, and tonal centers and tonality and such are things that we also need to address, obviously. But that has I feel like a superhero, you know, and I feel like I can at any minute stop the music and say, let's go again, use my tuning fork and sing every single note in the vertical moment. You know, if you just keep going and going, and you know what was one of the things that helped me the most? I couldn't have anticipated this. During the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, I didn't have access to a piano for the first time. I couldn't go to campus, I couldn't touch a piano. I had to learn very tall scores. And I mean, we were still imagining that, Jen, maybe we would do that atonal fugal, Franz Schmidt book of the seven seals.
Fugues.
Yes. Right? And I was audiating that stuff and learning it with my tuning fork, and because I had no other option. Right. And it made me superhero. Wow. I feel like I can sing anything now. I am just unafraid.
If you were practicing that piece without a piano, I bow down to your skills.
Heavens. No, it was not a pleasant experience. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know if that answers your question, man. But I really do think that the tuning fork, it never leaves my side, and it is part of how I ask questions about music. It's always in my handbag. And what's funny is, back in the days when I used to travel a lot, and we all used to travel a lot, depending on the level of music literacy in the country, they would either stop me at the airport if I have the tuning fork or tell me to just go. And I remember coming back from a conference in Estonia and being ready to defend myself. No, this is a musical tool that I need in my handbag. It's not a weapon. And then the woman took it out and she said, is it an A or a C? I just love that.
That's awesome.
It's pretty great. So I'm very curious. You teach at a liberal arts, like a true liberal arts university, where they have an open curriculum. I'm so curious. What does that look like? What are the upsides?
Right. So I mean, I come from this very almost conservatory style college of music background, right, where we are very focused on music, and maybe we take some other things and we call them extracurricular, right? They are side issues for us. We keep our eyes on the prize. So this has been a bit of a shocker for me, right? So to really try and find the value in, or like to try and think how do I make these concepts that are so important to me because they are my job important to people whose job it isn't, you know, who are interested in politics or who are interested in history. And I've had to go back to what sparks joy for me in music, to say, okay, do you hear that? And let me tell you why this is cool. And then to kind of trick them into learning, okay, well, that's what this chord is all about. The cool thing about Hamilton College and this open curriculum is that I was wondering whether that might have been a better choice for me, because I dabbled in journalism and art and sciences and whatever before I got sucked into music. But I think as an advisor, I am encouraged to discourage focus in one field. So if my advisee says, you know, I think music and math is the right thing for me, that might be true, but have you tried Arabic? And only once you have, you'll know that you don't like it. So let's see how we can take this thing that looks like a very good idea to me on paper and say, okay, well, why don't you take history of modern dance or whatever with that? And the great thing about teaching here is, I will say that the students are exceptionally bright, that we have a really small admissions percentage. It's an incredibly gifted group of people. So they're very curious and they keep you on your toes the whole time. And they draw the passion out of you. You know, where I'm so used to drilling. Okay, now we're going to drill. What are all of these types of chords? Say the letter names. That's not the type of education that these kids want. They want to know, why is this cool? Why is it interesting? And there's a lot of emphasis on interdisciplinary work. If you can find a way to create a course with someone from another department, that is a big win. If you can get a student to do an interdisciplinary dissertation or thesis at the end of their senior year, you've won. Then you've done the right thing for Hamilton. And the other thing that's great is that they don't just focus on academics on an interdisciplinary level. It's also experiences. So they'll say, well, I know you've been studying very hard and you have A's for all of these things, but have you joined the swimming team yet? Or have you tried figure skating? And maybe that's going to make you think about this geometry project that you're doing differently. So it's a very cool environment. It's weird for me not to be somewhere where we almost feel like it's a competitive music department, that you want to be on top of your game. The more important thing is everyone enjoying this right now? Are we learning something that we didn't know at the beginning of the rehearsal? Yeah.
I was perusing through your the courses that you're offering on your website, and actually pulled it up again. And some of these I'm like, I want to take performance, ritual, and technology.
It's my colleague. She teaches that from an Airstream in Ithaca. Wow. She's an incredible person.
And there's other ones, the art of active listening, Black voices in song. And then this one, I think, has the longest title, so well done. Social justice, activism, and artistry in group singing, exploring identity and meaning in choral music. That sounds like an amazing class. But that's like you're weaving in. I mean, just as you talked about this interdisciplinary approach, you know, and I think with choral music especially, that's one of the big things in choir music is this realization that we can be, as a choir, as singers, voices for social justice, and a choir can be an activist in our society.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. Because we have the privilege of being on stage as a group of people with text. And everyone sitting there has to shut up and listen to us. We have to use that privilege.
So true. And it's something that brings really like broad groups of people together. I think about that a lot of times at symphony chorus because
Yes.
there are people of all ages there,
Yeah.
all races, all religions, all political viewpoints, we're all in that room together and we all have the same mission for several hours a week every Monday night.
Trying
And
not to miss the next upbeat. That's all
Yeah.
we do. Like, oh,
Yeah.
let's just not sing this long note too long again. Oh,
Yeah.
again.
And it's pretty magical, really. It's pretty
Yeah.
magical and it's a pretty
Isn't it
powerful thing
incredible?
to do.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how the most varied views I see on Facebook, right? Because we can get so siloed in our social media. The most varied views I see are from those members of the Dallas Symphony Chorus, you know, and I appreciate it so much, and that's, you know, they are also my community.
Well, we have just loved our time chatting with Charlotte. This has been so fantastic. But we want to end just with some short questions, some off the cuff. I can't remember what we call it. What do we call it?
It's like lightning round.
Lightning
Rapid
round.
fire.
Yes. Rapid fire. It's the end of the
Rapid
semester. I
fire.
can't even think anymore. Like, what are we doing?
What do we do? Yeah. It's
Are you
that
going to
time
ask
of the
me
semester.
to spell diminished chords for you? Okay, I'm ready.
But Ben, you were writing something down. Do you have
I
something
do
there?
actually.
Okay, why don't you go first?
My question is, what is the most important aural skill?
Oh man, yeah, I told you I come from a robot background, so now I have to figure it all out, and I have to tell you exactly the very most important one. I am thinking finding do, knowing where do is. Until we sing much more music that isn't rooted in tonal harmony, knowing where do is at all times, having an eye on do in your peripheral ear vision.
Yeah, cool.
That's good. That's good. Paul, do you want to go? I have one, but
Okay,
if
you can
wanna
go,
you
Jenn.
can. Okay. So favorite choral warm-up to prepare the breath.
Do, mi, re, fa, mi, so, fa, la. Diatonic thirds, singing them in canons in seconds against one another, singing them upside down, having one group start on mi and another one on do at the top and coming down. Favorite one. And then when they least expect it and they've memorized it, change it to do, fa, re, so. Change it to fourths. It's gonna kill them.
All right. So mine is, what recommendation do you have for the beginning freshman student coming in to study music, specifically in light of being successful in aural skills, sightseeing? What do you think is the best thing to tell them to be prepared?
Well, of the students I taught in oral training in that first gig I had at the University of Pretoria, who are now musicians, the ones that have stayed musicians and been great musicians said the following was helpful to them. Be great at every aspect of being a musician. Even when you think, I am absolutely nailing this singer's format right now, there's an opportunity for you to be a better dancer. If you think, okay, well, right now I'm killing it at sight reading, there's an opportunity for you to be better at audiating multiple levels. Just try and outdo like all of the people that you admire across the field. Like, just go for it and go to jazz concerts, go to the African music exhibit, go to everything, and just try and see how far can I push myself, because we can also be siloed within music sometimes. You know, I am super good at playing exactly this thing every time, and I get hired every time. Well, become as much of a full-rounded musician as you can.
That is fantastic. Fantastic advice.
Yep.
So tell us, as we're wrapping up, a little bit about what projects you have. You know, you just finished your doctorate not too long ago. So, but of course you have many other things you're working on, I'm sure. So any type of projects you're working on, and then how can people find you if they want to learn more about your work and what you're up to?
Well, I will say that if this podcast comes out about a month or so from now, that yes, I will have finished my doctorate. So hopefully that will be a little bit more true. But I have this idea brewing at the moment. about happy hormones and choral singing. And I'm starting to research, how does dopamine work, how does serotonin work, and how does oxytocin work, and how can you, as part of the rehearsal, see which one is the best one for this moment? Because the choir that laughs together is the choir that sings best together. So that's the new journey that I'll take. At the moment, I'm writing about pitch collections in Jakomantiarvi. I'd like to take a step away from that and write about something completely different for a little while and research that. If anyone would like to reach me, I am on Hamilton College's website, or they can reach me at Botha, CBOTHA, at hamilton.edu.
So that's our show. Thank you so much for listening to Note Doctors, the Music Theory and Pedagogy podcast. We'll be back with more interviews with professors and teachers who will be dropping all sorts of theory knowledge for your education, edification, and enjoyment. So until then, bye-bye.